Hello everybody and welcome to the third and final part of this Q&A session. We've had short, long, deep and joke answers along the way, but it's time we wrap this up. So without further ado, let's dive into these remaining questions. Alan Lane's got a whole bunch of new questions. Number 1, would I ever do a prequel series using Fallout New California? So I kind of answered this in part 2 of the Q&A. I don't really want to venture into fan-made quest mods because I don't want to risk contradicting future lore. Plus, based on what I've heard, the way that Fallout New California ties in with New Vegas clashes with what I have in mind for the Courier anyway. Number 2, what's your favorite personal Fallout gun and what is the Courier's favorite gun? So, for the Courier, I already answered this in part 2. As for myself, I personally love a light shining in darkness. That's the unique pistol from Honest Hearts. I just have a thing for fancy looking engraved guns in general, so you can add Maria, Mysterious Pistol, Lucky, and other such weapons to my list. Number 3, do I go to any conventions like Comic-Con? I've never been to a convention before. I probably will at some point, but it's really not high on my priorities. Number 4, are you surprised the series has been going on for 10 years? Well, back when I first started the series, I was kind of hoping it wouldn't take this long to finish, if I'm honest. Of course, my second master's degree back in 2016 kind of threw all my predictions out of the window. Plus, I was originally hoping I could maintain the old schedule of 3 seasons per year after I graduated, which became less and less realistic as time went on. Now, if you're asking me if I would have given up sometime before now, again, my original intentions were to keep going no matter what, but once I realized I've got an audience of very dedicated fans, it solidified my intentions to keep this going. And really, I have to give credit to the game itself. It's got a consistently interesting story from start to finish that I never really got bored with making episodes for. Number 5, what keeps you motivated to make Courier's Mind? Oh god, let's not go through that again. Number 6, what is your favorite character the Courier has interacted with? Oh, definitely the companions. I mean, the sheer amount of lines Obsidian wrote for each of them allowed me to make so many conversations that strayed beyond what they originally intended. But if I have to pick between them, I would say Veronica. Mainly because of how complex her character is. Now, that's not me saying the other companions are not complex. I just think that Veronica is on a different level. Most of the other companions are in some ways a little one note. So Boone and Cass, for example, are mostly just varying shades of cynical. Veronica, meanwhile, has 2 very different sides. The cheerful side that she presents on the surface, and the distressed/depressed side she only reveals after she trusts you. I personally feel like she's a more fleshed out character out of all the other companions. Number 7, who do you think started the Great War? Oh god. So, I am aware that there are a bunch of theories floating around the Fallout community regarding this topic. Off the top of my head, the ones I know about are Voltec, the aliens, and Pam from Fallout 4. Now, to be honest, I don't think Bethesda is ever going to come clean on this one, and frankly, I hope they keep it that way. You see, outside of Fallout, my favorite pieces of media regarding nuclear war and its aftermath tend to follow a similar approach whereby the actual initiators of the war are nearly always considered arbitrary. And that's because at the end of the day, there are no victors in nuclear war, and after the flames have died down, the question of whoever actually pressed the button first becomes pointless. I'm reminded of how in the 1983 movie The Day After, they deliberately left that question ambiguous, and towards the end of the film, when the president finally issues a statement to the people on the radio, a man actually rages about how he never told them who actually started the war and who won.
That's it? That's all he's gonna say?
Hey, maybe we're gonna be okay.
What do you want to hear?
I wanna know who started it, who fired first, who preempted.
You're never gonna know that.
What difference does it make?
He doesn't know how badly we were
He
hit,
sure would have
but he
told
knows
us if
we
they would have
just as
fired
bad.
first.
He doesn't want anyone to think we lost the war.
You believe that? You believe everything they tell you?
And isn't that kind of the point? When it comes to nuclear war, the reasons behind it hold no weight when the only things that prevail are pain, suffering, and death. And finally, number 8, what is a Chicago? Well, obviously it's where you go to find chicas. KRCH2R. Oh, that has to be shorthand for something, right? What kind of build was the Courier aiming towards? So, when I first started playing New Vegas, I was heavily influenced by how I played Fallout 3, which was basically the perfect build. I think most people know this, but it was possible to get 100 in all skill points and 10 in all special stats in Fallout 3, if you knew what you were doing. Well, Obsidian tried to prevent you from doing that. In the vanilla game, there wasn't enough skill points available for you to get 100 in all skills. But then they kind of threw that out of the window with the DLCs raising the level cap each time, so anyway, back on topic, I deliberately went for a generalist build in order to maximize the amount of weapons I could have him use. So yeah, to answer your question, the Courier has abilities in every field at the moment. Hammerman Dan asks, how do I talk for so long without getting tired? Well, I do take breaks in between each line. It just sounds like a continuous stream because of editing. And I guess over time, I just got better at going longer and longer stretches without stopping. Incidentally, doing this show actually made me better at giving presentations to a live audience. This series has given me tangible skills. Konstantin Kabenko asks, I noticed that you seem to take certain challenges in making Courier's mind. No story altering or gameplay altering mods, apart from Sprint. No excessive mixing of in-game voice lines. No radio and minimum VATs. I have to ask, are there other reasons for those, aside from the goal of being as close to source material as possible? And are there other self-imposed rules you operate under while doing this? I'm not really trying to impose challenges. A lot of the things you mentioned are down to technical limitations, but let's have a look at those one at a time. So for story altering mods, I mostly answered this already. I don't want to risk contradicting established lore. As for gameplay altering, I mainly use certain aspects of Project Nevada. You identified Sprint, but I also use the grenade hotkey. I find that most gameplay altering mods tends to focus on statistics that are not really visible. Considering that I have the UI switched off, I just don't see the point. I was definitely looking forward to the dual wielding mod, but it seems like most of those projects have just been abandoned. Excessive mixing of in-game voice lines. I'm not sure what you mean by this. I can only assume you mean taking voice lines apart and making completely new sentences? I did consider doing that for the companions for a long time, but I decided not to for two reasons. Number one, it would be very time consuming, and number two, I'm not a good enough sound editor to make the sentences sound natural. Very often, the tone and emphasis of the words in a mixed up sentence can make it sound really unnatural, almost like some kind of text-to-speech device. No radio. So there are two reasons for this. Firstly, the whole point of the series is for you to hear what the Courier is thinking. I personally find adding radio music on top of that to be just distracting. Secondly, I don't trust YouTube's copyright system at all. Really, the radio is just going to add an unnecessary layer of complexity into the production. Minimum VATs. Again, I don't understand the point here. I haven't been shy when it comes to using VATs. I mean, I typically avoid spamming it for two reasons. Firstly, the lack of UI means that I have no idea what the probability of hits actually are. Secondly, I don't know how much action points I have left. If I was to go into VATs and then realize, oh, I don't have enough AP to do anything, then I've actually ruined this recording. Because VATs automatically changes your aim to focus on one of the targets, but it doesn't return you to your original aim after exiting. So instead, you will still be aiming at the target. That would make it impossible for me to edit out that portion cleanly. So yeah, I would rather be frugal with it. Konstantin also asks, would you use the stealth suit as a companion character, mixing her lines to make her more than an automated system, spewing the same nonsense? I haven't really decided yet. The problem with the stealth suit is that she doesn't have that many lines. I think she would start to sound repetitive very quickly. Oh, on a side note, the companion characters from the DLCs all seem to have their idle chat frequency turned up higher than regular companions. I distinctly remember going through Dead Money with Dog/God, and he just kept spamming the same 4 or 5 lines over and over. I'm going to have to mod that out somehow. Dying Battery asks, how much are you willing to modify or change the game's narrative? Oh, I don't know how to answer this without spoiling things. Let's just say I'm not going to make any extreme changes, but I might use ways of implying certain things have happened off screen that you wouldn't normally be able to do in-game. Again, this is spoiler-heavy territory, but suffice to say it's not going to stray too far from the game's existing narrative. He then asks, in earlier seasons of Courier's Mind, I noticed you credited someone called Dashiamo in the description for creating the title logo, and it doesn't seem to be in the description anymore. Does he or she no longer work with you, or did you simply forget to credit them? Okay, this is purely my bad. He is still working with me. I think there were maybe 3 seasons where I had to get someone else to help because he was occupied. In fact, I have a feeling one of the reasons I stopped mentioning him is because one of the other people I used didn't really have much of an online presence, and they didn't want me to use their real name. And when I got Dashiamo back again, I just forgot to include his name. Like I said, that's my bad. He doesn't really use his YouTube channel anymore, but I should credit him regardless. The 10 of Diamonds card asks, do you have any plans to make a larger social media presence? I'd like to see more posts from you other than videos. I'll be honest, I don't really do social media outside of my immediate social circles. I'm honestly not sure what kind of posts you want to see anyway. I'll add this to my list of ideas I don't really have time to work on. Eye of Evil Good wants to know how I feel about Outer Worlds. Is it as good as New Vegas? Oh... Do you have any idea how long my answer would be about that game? It would need to have its own video. Now, let me give you the ultra short version. It's a good start to a new franchise, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as New Vegas. I've definitely got my own problems with it, but it's more to do with my personal tastes when it comes to story and setting. Suffice to say, I liked the game. I wasn't really disappointed because I kept my expectations in check. I just think it has a lot of scope for improvement. We'll have to see with a sequel. Phantom666 brought up Halo as a potential series after Courier's Mind. Yeah, I don't think I would do that, mainly because Master Chief is not really a silent protagonist, or even a blank slate in the first place. I think it would have to be Halo Reach or Halo ODST, and in the latter case, that only featured the rookie in like half the game anyway. If I had to, I can probably make Reach work, but even then, I'm not too engaged with the whole super soldier character archetype. I would much rather portray an average Joe or just a regular Marine. That way I can contract what's happening in the game versus the kind of life that person used to have. Phantom also wants to know how excited I feel about doing the New Vegas DLCs. Oh, I'm equally excited and nervous about them. I felt like that way for Season 13 as well, to be honest. Put it this way, people have a lot of expectations for these DLCs, so that's naturally gonna add pressure for me to meet those expectations. But don't worry, I have a rough idea how I would approach it, and you know, sometimes I surprise myself with the kind of writing I can spontaneously come up with on the spot. Lee Everett wants to know what would the Courier think if he was brought into the real world, and what he would think if he actually met me. Oh boy. If he was in the real world, I think he would be just as, if not more frustrated than he already is. Because compared to the Fallout universe, we're currently in a much better position, and yet we have a lot of problems that really should have been solved by now. I think generally speaking, his views about our world right now would be similar to how Ross Scott talks about society and the problems we face in his monthly Twitch streams. In other words, a lot of despair. And if we were to actually meet, I think he would also give me a very hard time because I have plenty of problems that he wouldn't like. Sometimes I think I deliberately write him in a way that also criticizes aspects of my own life. Wheel832 asks, who is your favorite Fallout protagonist? Well, obviously the Courier, I mean, do you even need to ask? But honestly, nostalgia aside, my preferences towards certain protagonists are more down to what you can get them to do. So I quite like the Sole Survivor, to be honest, mainly because this is the person who arguably went through the most traumatic experience out of everyone else. Having basically lost everything from their old life in a very short amount of time. And yet, they're able to make tangible improvements to the lives of everyday people by building settlements. I think now that Season 13 is complete, you can probably tell what my personal views are when it comes to leaders. I place greater value on leaders who are able to and willing to get their hands dirty and actually improve people's lives, not just in the distant future, but every step of the way. We are so used to leaders nowadays who would promise you the moon sometime in the future, and in return they expect your unwavering support now and forever. That's why I like how the Soul Survivor has the ability to literally build houses for his people, and if you're willing to put the work into it, you can make it however luxurious and secure as you want. Will also asks, what is your typical playstyle in New Vegas? I mean, do you try different builds based on min-maxing certain skills and weapons, or are you more into role-playing, crafting backstories and acting in-game based on how that character would conduct themselves? I don't actually play through New Vegas that often, believe it or not. In fact, if you count the Courier right now, this is only my 5th playthrough, which I know it sounds like a lot, but I basically did one for each ending before this current playthrough, and I honestly didn't bother actually role-playing, unless it would have affected my factional reputation. And in terms of builds, I think I went for a generic pure ranged build once, and then a pure melee build for another one. I think part of the reason for that is because New Vegas doesn't really do enough to discourage you from going for a min-max perfect character. This is gonna piss off a lot of people, but I think Fallout 4 and 76 actually did a better job forcing you to commit to a certain playstyle because of the way they handled the special and perks. RP asks, what is your favorite Fallout game? Well, definitely New Vegas if you're talking about a full package. Purely from a gameplay experience, I would say Fallout 4, but the writing in New Vegas is just on a different level. Really, my idea of a perfect Fallout game would be for Obsidian to handle the writing and lore, while Bethesda handles the gameplay, the map, and art design. RP then asks, what is the thought process behind the Courier's factional choices? That's basically what I already talked about in the episodes themselves. I more or less mirrored my own thoughts when it came to his reasoning, especially his rant towards House at the end of Season 13. RP then asks, were the Achievement Hunter voiceover videos deleted? If so, why? No, they were not deleted, I just set them to private, and yes, I think you already guessed why. For those of you who don't know, the most viewed video on my channel used to be a parody of the opening sequence to The Dark Knight, where I dubbed the Achievement Hunters over the bank robbers. I'm still very proud of how I made that video, but unfortunately last year it was revealed that one of the key members of that group was sexually exploiting his fans for many years. Considering how much of a focus this person was in that video, I decided to act preemptively. I do not want to touch that drama with a 10-foot pole. Shada Blades asks, do you like having evil choices in Fallout games, and if so, would you consider them? I feel like I've answered this already in one of the earlier videos. I prefer morally ambiguous choices rather than something that's cartoonishly evil. When I play these games, I rarely roleplay, which is why I usually turn away from the more obviously evil choices. I have watched other people choose those options before, but only out of curiosity to see how the game would react. Seth B343 asks, what would you go back and change or polish up from earlier in the series? Oh, Season 1. Oh my god, definitely Season 1. I actually don't think the writing aged too badly for the most part, considering the Courier just recovered from his injuries, but pretty much everything else about that season is painfully amateur. If I was to redo Season 1, which is definitely on my to-do list, I would obviously turn off the HUD, but I would also change the pacing. This was back when I wasn't sure if I should literally show things like the Courier cooking his meals or gathering supplies, which is why looking back, I think those 10 episodes could have been squeezed into 7 without too many problems. But beyond that, I obviously wish I had a better microphone, better hardware to run the game at a better quality, etc. Look, I had to work with what I had at the time. Papa G wants to go back to the question of how the Courier was able to do so much in one day. This is basically the follow-up to the 2.5 seasons in one day question from last time. Look, beyond me fucking up the in-game time scale, the Courier was driven by adrenaline and his lust for revenge. Never underestimate someone who's got serious motivation. Papa G also asks, which faction does the Courier think is best for New Vegas? What would have happened if he never met Veronica? So right now, I think he just believes that the NCR is the least bad option, which is why he told the others to just let Colonel Moore carry on. I think the Courier would have still had issues just destroying the Brotherhood even without Veronica. He would still have preferred to have come up with a way to make good use of the Brotherhood's expertise. I don't think that would have changed. Maybe he wouldn't have flat out betrayed House like that without Veronica, but it would have shaken his trust at the very least. Maybe he would have supported House all the way, but only because, once again, he would think of him as the least bad option. And finally, Draco Sonic Mile asks, do I find music helpful or distracting while I'm working on something? It depends on what I'm working on, to be honest. I don't listen to anything in the background when I'm working on Courier's mind, but when I'm working on my job, if it's not something that requires too much problem solving, then I would listen to music in the background, sure. But if I was programming, which I do occasionally as part of my job, then I would usually do it in silence. I mostly listen to podcasts these days anyway, if I'm honest. And to quote Doc Mitchell, that's all she wrote. Thank you all once again for being such a fantastic community in the last 10 years. Even though I keep saying that I would have kept going with the series regardless, it would be silly to assume that it would be anywhere near as much of a passion project without your continued support and feedback. Stay tuned for Season 14.